Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Alhamdulillah, it's a great ni'mah and blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has given us this opportunity to spend this blessed odd night of Laylatul Qadr in the masjid and participate in this blessed prayer. One thing I noticed was that Shaykh Ansar recited a surah that many of us are perhaps very well aware of. Surah Al-Hujurat was the chapter of the Quran that the Shaykh recited in the first rak'ah of this prayer. And it is a very unique surah in its revelation and also in the content that we find in this surah. And the reason being is because that this surah, when it was revealed in Medina. And the background behind the story of Surah Al-Hujurat. Hujurat literally means apartments. So in the time of the Messenger ﷺ, you had Masjid al-Nabawi, and just adjacent to it, or rather connecting to the western wall, I believe, you had these apartments, these little rooms. They weren't actually apartments, they're very small rooms. So like your bedroom today in the Champions area is probably bigger than these houses. But these were the houses of the wives of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one thing that you'll find is that like if you go today to Medina, this area has pretty much been engulfed inside Masjid al-Nabawi, all of these houses. But the size was very small. You'd be assuming probably 8 feet by 8 feet, something very small. But there was an incident in which a tribe came from Arabia by the name of Banu Tamim, and they had entered into Masjid al-Nabawi. And the Prophet ﷺ was spending his time in one of those apartments. What happened next was there were some Arabians, and they were Bedouins. And Bedouins were known for their very rough nature. They're very, like, as the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man sakana al-badiyata jafa," that a person who lives in the desert becomes a very rough, tempered person, a very harsh person. So these people, they came to the wall of one of these apartments and said, "Ya Muhammad, come outside." That this is the method that they used to address the Prophet ﷺ. And obviously this is something we can't even comprehend today. Despite our weak iman, we can't imagine a scenario in which we would address the Prophet ﷺ in that manner. But despite all of that, the Prophet ﷺ did not come out very upset and rebuke them. Rather, he waited for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reveal a surah that would address this concern. So that, in retrospect, this event, however shocking it may seem to us, was a big ni'mah for our Muslim ummah today. And the reason being is that this surah is very unique in that there are tons of rulings that are to be derived from this surah in terms of social evils and vices that we have today. And these lessons apply to us every single day of our lives. If you and I were to just sit down and read the tafsir of Surah Al-Hujurat, you will find countless amounts of information that is very relevant to your lives, and it can be contextualized in every day and age. So this was a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in this surah, you'll find that one verse in particular that I wanted to highlight was the verse that goes, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la yaskhar qawmun min qawmin asa an yakunu khayran minhum wa la nisa'un min nisa'in asa an yakunna khayran minhun." So in this verse, you'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse. And one thing very special about this verse is that in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us, the ummah, the nation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we are not merely a nation of rituals. We are not a people who literally were just given this book of rituals and commands, and this is how you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's it, end of story. In fact, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah tells us that this is a middle nation, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, one thing that the scholars have mentioned is that our nation, in comparison to the nations that came before us, has this aspect of moderation. And that moderation, one aspect of that moderation is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us not merely how to live in a ritualistic sense. So the scholars of Bani Israel, as well as the scholars before them, they had an issue. And this issue did not only pertain to the usual folk. This issue pertained to the scholars of these nations, like the people who were deemed the most religious figures in their societies, that they unfortunately were very extremist in nature. So those that were religious amongst them, whenever they wanted to practice their religion, what they would do is they would set out, leave town, adopt a life of celibacy, and go live in monasteries, because they didn't want to deal with the usual folk. And then you had other people on the other end of the spectrum who would go out and they would sell the deen for meager dirhams, meager amounts of money. They would distort their actual religious texts just for small amounts of money that could be enumerated like in one hand. They would distort their religious texts for small amounts of money. So you had this extremism. So you had people who were religious, devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they didn't have the patience to deal with the usual folk, and they adopted lifestyles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited, such as celibacy and monkhood. And then you had other people who did not take the deen very seriously at all, despite being religiously educated. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us that our nation is not merely a nation of rituals, that this deen applies to every single second of your life that you live. The method that you are sitting right now, the deen has a say in the way that you're sitting and the way that you're interacting with the person next to you. Are you disturbing that person? Are you a means of harm to them? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse, and in this verse he mentions 6 vices, 6 sins that human beings do at a social level. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also in the next verse rectifies these six issues that you'll find in social clashes, and these issues that people usually have as a result of some ego, or as a result of financial class, or various things that cause people to feel above other people. So I just wanted to go through these 6 points, and one thing that I would recommend is, because this is just a very quick breakdown, one thing that I would recommend for each and every one of you to do today is to go home and to open this surah and open up a very small, it could be a concise English tafsir, whatever you have. It could be a translation. Sit down with your children or with your families and just look this one single verse up. I'll give you the verse number. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse speaks about, first and foremost, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that none amongst you should mock or scoff at those around him. لا يسخر قوم من قوم. That no man should scoff at any other different man. No man should mock a different man, despite any of the apparent faults that exist in a different person. You know, whether they're of a racial class that you don't approve of, or even if that person has some deficiency that isn't related to something that was natural. Like, for example, someone adopted a lifestyle that is mockable. That isn't something that you and I should do. That isn't for us to judge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يسخر قوم من قوم, that no group of men should scoff or mock a different group of men. وَلَا نِسَاءٌ مِّن نِسَاءٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't stop there. Usually in the Quran you'll have a scenario in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses males and females alike in one sitting. But in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to emphasize. So not only does he tell the men not to scoff men, he also tells women not to scoff as well, not to mock others as well. وَلَا نِسَاءٌ مِّن نِسَاءٍ. And some scholars have mentioned that this is due to the emphasis that is present in this verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving this ruling again. So it was already established that men should not do this. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, instead of allowing that general word, which encompasses males and females, to take on the ruling that applies to everyone, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to enact this ruling upon women as well, so as to help us understand the importance of this. And then he goes on to say, عَسَىٰ أَن يَكُونُوا خَيْرًا مِّنْهُمْ. That it is possible that those people that you are mocking, those people that you are scoffing, are better than you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala similarly, after mentioning the ruling in regards to women, he says, عَسَىٰ أَن يَكُنَّ خَيْرًا مِّنْهُنْ. That it is possible that those women that are being scoffed are better than the women that are doing the mocking. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. That none of you should try to find faults in people around you. A lot of times you'll find at work or at school, it doesn't matter what your age is, the social circle that you're in is usually of a type that likes to single people out, to point people out, hey, this guy didn't do this, or this guy, you know, he did badly on this test, or you know, he's doing bad at work, or you'll find a certain fault. And there's certain things that are so inappropriate, I don't even want to give examples in the masjid. but they exist in our circles. It doesn't matter if it's your circle or my circle. These issues exist, these social issues exist, and no one wants to say anything about them. And there are clear guidelines in the Quran as to the interaction that we should be having at a social level. After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finishes talking about finding faults in others, He says, وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَلَا تَنَابَذُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. Do not call each other by nicknames. And nicknames here specifically refers to those nicknames that are of a derogatory nature. Obviously, if I call, Faris Habibi or something, that wouldn't be considered something that the verse is prohibiting. But we also have this is very prevalent in our times, and it's been prevalent for thousands of years, where in societies, people who like to demean those that are apparently lower than them, they call them by nicknames. And those that are getting bullied can't do anything about it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came to rectify these matters. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ, as narrated in one hadith, says, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. That I was sent merely to rectify the issues that exist in character, to rectify and to complete the character of the believers. This was the primal focus, that it's regardless of whether or not you commit oppression against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That definitely is something severe. But if you commit oppressions to the people around you, and those people do not forgive you, there is no chance that on the Day of Judgment you'll be forgiven. Those people will take away from your good deeds, and that is something to be very afraid of and aware of. And God consciousness, taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, starts at those people around you. It starts at those people around you. Go back to those people that you've humiliated in public and tell them, look, I'm sorry I did this. Please forgive me. And those people they'll welcome you back with open arms. How many people won't? They'll just be happy that they're no longer being made fun of. That's usually the case. And last but not least, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اجْتَنِبُوا كَثِيرًا مِنَ الظَّنِّ إِنَّ بَعْضَ الظَّنِّ إِثْمٌ. That, O you who believe, refrain from ill assumptions of those around you. Stop assuming bad about other people. Husn al-dhann, which is to have, what's a good translation for husn al-dhann? Assuming good of those around you. Having the benefit of the doubt, right? This is a concept that we say so frequently, but if you look and you analyze your personal life, anytime you look at someone and what exactly goes through your head, is it usually something positive about that person, or is it always going back to what was previously mentioned in the verse, finding faults in others? And specifically, this verse does not push away the notion that if there is suspicion in someone that they have committed a crime, that crime is to be overlooked. Rather, this is specific to the scenarios in which a person blames another person mentally or verbally for something that has no proof behind it. And this is very prevalent. You'll find that in our societies, Desi societies, and alike, and other societies alike, we have a lot of this ill, very negative thought process that goes around. And unfortunately, it happens verbally inside the homes. Perhaps outside you're not going to say anything, but with your brother, with your friend, you're going to say something. And that happens. That's very prevalent. That's very real in our societies. And the sixth point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in these two verses in Surah Al-Hujurat is the fifth, rather, is to avoid spying on one another. And lastly, the sixth, which is very important, which is to avoid backbiting one another. Later on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then begins to explain the severity of backbiting and how it's tantamount to eating the flesh of your dead brother. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala poses this question to the believers, that would you be content with eating the dead flesh of your brother? Would you be content with that? A lot of times in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will present a vice, and then He'll present a parable, just so that you're able to relate to that. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was merely to say, don't backbite, that wouldn't have that effect, as if in the scenario where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, just imagine the scenario that the person that you are backbiting about, it is as if you're eating his dead flesh. You can't imagine that. It doesn't matter how gory and nasty your mind is. You cannot imagine eating a different person. Cannibalism is the worst of things, the most disgusting thing you can imagine. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings that into your mind because He wants to demonstrate the severity of these sins. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection from all of these social sins. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the tawfiq to go back and rectify our actions, to heal the broken bonds of brotherhood that we have created as a result of these sins, and allow us to move forward together as a society in a very positive manner. One last thing I wanted to mention is, after mentioning all of these vices, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts the prime focal point so now that a person has all of these sins in mind, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala focuses all of that attention on one final verse. And that verse is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demonstrating the equality that exists between human beings by nature. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have only created you in tribes, in different races, of different colors, of different genes, right? So people seem genetically superior to you, or people seem, they look better, or they're of a race that perhaps that appeals to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says none of that matters. All of these things that you take pride in, none of that matters. Because all of these sins were related to social issues. Issues that exist in societies as a result of social class. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says none of that matters. The only type of person that is superior in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is he who is more God conscious. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has only made us of different colors and shades and different racial backgrounds so that we may be able to recognize one another. Can you imagine a scenario in the world where every single person looked exactly the same? Like certain races look that way to us, right? Like if you take a white person, you take them to Africa, they'll think that the entire Africa is like one race. But if you go to Africa, people won't feel that way. Like if people are upset if you call them from a different city within the same country, because they're able to recognize these differences. Had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made all of these people the exact same, no one would be able to recognize one another. And this is from the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He has made 7 billion people in our world today, all of different shades and colors, so that we may be able to recognize one another. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to inculcate that God consciousness that prevents us from falling trapped to these social sins. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. There is a dua